This says Office of the White House, Office of the Press Secretary, December 9th, 2016. So this was the original White House executive order. Arctic environmental stewardship is in the national interests. In furtherance of this principle, and as articulated in the March 10th, 2016 US-Canada Joint Statement on Climate, Energy, and Arctic Leadership, the United States has resolved to confront challenges in a changing Arctic by working to conserve Arctic biodiversity, support and engage Alaska Native tribes, incorporate traditional knowledge into decision-making, and build a sustainable Arctic economy that relies on the highest safety and environmental standards, including adherence to national climate goals. So what happened in 2016? They put this forward and then it was revoked under the Trump administration, is that correct?
As far as we know.
Mm-hmm. And then when we were talking the other day, you said that things had really changed and that the tribal communities along the Bering Sea had gotten together to provide management, resource management. Am I saying that correctly, or would you phrase it differently? How the tribal communities along the Bering Sea in this zone have come together and they are now environmental managers?
No.
No? Okay.
That's what we're striving for, but you know, we're not anywhere near there.
I see. What needs to take place?
Well, for one thing, we need allies, and we need the financial wherewithal to be able to bring all the regions together to discuss this and come up with a plan and implement the plan. I mean, this, you know, the regions don't have much money. Mm-hmm. And so they are only concentrating on issues within their borders. And the Bering Sea ecosystem requires all of these entities to be involved. Mm-hmm. so that we can have a voice on what is being done in the Bering Sea, rather than having an individual region talk about what they want. We talk about what we want in the Bering Sea as mm-hmm. Native people.
I'm going to turn off my video here so we get solid audio. So you're not going to see me in a second, but I'll be here. Okay. So I wanted to ask you to tell me about your upbringing in the Pribilof Islands on St. Paul and why this is important to you and to Native communities that we're discussing. What does it mean?
First of all, I would say Angwan, which is hello, my other self, which is the way that our people greet each other all the time. And I am a Nungin, which is in Western terms Aleut, but we don't call ourselves that because that was the name given to us by our former oppressors. So it means like the Yupik and the Inupiat and the Dene and all these other groups in Alaska. Unungin means the people, and in this case, we are the people by the sea, and we have a very rich history where we were the only people that didn't have footwear even in the wintertime. And we didn't have any food storage technologies except for air drying. I feel that I believe that we are the only Alaska Native group that didn't have any food storage technologies. And we have been out in the Bering Sea for over 10,000 years, and we're still there. And I was born and raised on St. Paul Island, part of the Pribilof Island, in the middle of the Bering Sea. That is not part of the Aleutian chain, but is in the middle, up above the Aleutian chain, about 250 miles from the nearest land along the Aleutian chain. And this is, I was born and raised on an island that's very small. It's 12 miles wide and 12 miles long and 5 miles wide. And we had, when I was a child, about 1.2 million northern fur seals and 2.5 million seabirds, 1,000 reindeer, and 500 Unungan people in both St. George and St. Paul. St. George is our sister village 40 miles away. My traditional name was given to me at 4 years old by the last Kuyak that was left alive amongst my people. He gave me his name, and this is something that's been passed along for generations. And we would call each other Kuyak. And that name means like an arm extending out from the body, a carrier of ancient knowledge into modern times, a messenger. And I'm living the legacy of my name now. Anyway, to get to know my grandfather and for my grandfather to get to know me, I had to be with him 24/7 for 2 years, starting at age 4. I went to work with him. At that time, they were slaves of the federal government, and but nevertheless, he would take me to work with him every day. I would drink tea with him and his friends every night. I would pray with him every day, where we'd go down to the Bering Sea and take off our shirts and spray ourselves with the Bering Sea, praying towards the east. And that evening, we might go to the Russian Orthodox Church. He didn't see any importance in where one got one's spirituality. And he taught me the basics of why and how my people survived and thrived in the Bering Sea for over 10,000 years. And it was a day, I mean, the Pribilof Islands are called the birthplace of the winds. So we get wind all the time. But in this day, it was perfectly calm. There was no wind. The sea was perfectly flat and there was no cloud in the sky. We get 20 days of sunshine a year in the Bering Sea. And so this day was very unusual. And the seals were barking and the birds were singing. And I just, at 4 years old, I had to remark in Unungan Tunu, the Aleut language. I said something like, "It's sure beautiful." And he just puts his finger to his lips and says, "Tutuda." And that's all he said. And what he said probably encapsulates why our people survived and thrived in Bering Sea for over 10,000 years. And that is that we should listen. And not remark, because as soon as we say a word about or try to express our feelings, we diminish the experience. So the most important of human experiences are not to be vocalized, that we need to just take it all in. And that's the way my people were, that We developed the most densely populated linear mile of shoreline in North America for our time, in a place that's hard to eke out a living. And the reason for that is that my people understood that we had to be present in the moment and in the heart. The rest will be taken care of. And it requires a trust in every aspect of being a human being, that we had to embody this trust at the cellular level, where we trusted in ourselves, our lives, trust in our community, trust in the land, the sea, trust in the Mother Earth, universe, and the person, the being that we call a role, that we need to trust at such a level that that there was not a shred of doubt in our bodies. And with that kind of trust, everything is taken care of if you're in the heart and present in the moment. And that's the way my people were. And when I asked my elder on St. Paul, he was Father Lestenkoff, he said, you know, look at the birds. You think that they worry about where they're going to get their food the next day? And are we any different? And of course, the answer is no, that we are not any different, that the animals don't worry about where they're going to get their food the next day. And people, we've forgotten what our niche is, so we've deviated from that norm of knowing or not worrying about where our food is going to come from. And that's a very rich upbringing that I had. I mean, my generation was the last generation and had a very traditional upbringing, where all people in the village, all adults in the village literally raised me. And every day when I would walk out, starting at 4 years old, you know, if I encountered an adult, they always affirmed me. Good boy. And that's the way I was greeted by every adult every day from age 4 to age 13. That was quite a way to grow up. Then I'd be greeted in everybody's household like the long lost son whenever I went there. You know, I would, a day or night, I would go to a house and they would say, come in, sit down, eat. That's the way I was greeted every day. And I had to spend equal time with the men, equal time with the women, with the elders, and with my peers. And so with the elders, they would take me out camping with them every time they went out camping. And I would hear their stories for years, from age 5 to age 13. And the men would take me out hunting and fishing with them and teach me the men's ways. The women would teach me the women's ways. And of course, with my peers, all I had to do was play. And the adult's job was to create the space for me to learn, not tell me what to learn, how to learn, or to define anything. I grew up not asking a single question. I had to depend upon myself. And the ingenuity of it is that we are allowed as children to expand out to the maximum of our capability without the dictates of an adult. Nowadays we do the opposite. where we tell the kids what they need to learn, how they need to learn it, teach them how to learn it, and so over time we're dumbed down as human beings. And so anyway, that's where I grew up, and I was never scolded. Most people were scolded when they were kids. Our people did not believe in scolding kids because we are considered spirit beings in human form. And as spirit beings, we're easily traumatized. And so we have to be very careful about what we say and how we say it. And so that, in essence, is the kind of upbringing I had.
Thank you. I'm not asking a lot of questions because you told me maybe it's a good idea to listen. But thank you. But I have one question, and I think it's important as a story to tell non-native people. And that was your perception as a young man. And you told me the story previously of being 6 years old and going down to the bird cliffs. But you mentioned how it is that you can get a sense of a place so rich with so many animals and so much activity. Can you tell me that story again?
Yeah. You know, this is an island that's 12 miles long and 5 miles wide. You have 1.2 million northern fur seals and 2.5 million seabirds. So all this life is concentrated on the periphery of the island. It's quite intense, but a beautiful place for a child to be raised. Anyway, as part of my upbringing, I could wander anywhere I wanted, day or night, unsupervised by an adult. The only time the adult would intervene is if they were concerned about our safety. But so I loved the seabirds, and so I decided when I was 6 years old that I'm going to walk out of the village. 3 miles is the nearest bird cliff of intensity. So I would walk out to the village 3 miles at nighttime at 3 o'clock in the morning to get there before sunrise. And because at sunrise, the birds stir off the cliffs. And they are, I mean, we had all kinds of species, you know, thick-billed murres, common murres, least auklets, crested auklets, tufted puffin, horned puffin. All of these kinds of birds, they were just a cacophony of sound that I cannot describe to you. But when you get underneath the cliff, I would cross over large basalt boulders and to get underneath the cliff, and then sun would peek out, and then the birds would start stirring and flying, and they would circle in front of the cliffs, waiting to collect members of their own species before they go out foraging. So here's all these species flying at different heights, different speeds, and diagonally right, diagonally left. I mean, it was apparent chaos. But I noticed when I was 6 years old that they never even clipped a wing. And you can't imagine, there must have been at least 10,000 seabirds underneath that cliff. 10,000 seabirds, and none of them even hit each other. They didn't even clip a wing. And so I wondered, how do birds do that? You know, and I was 6 years old, and I said, well, birds don't think. And so I said, I want to be a bird. And so I focused on not thinking for maybe 2 months until I got it where I wouldn't have a single thought running through my head for hours, and I can still do that today. And it was just magical. then the hunters would take me out hunting with them. There'd be 4 or 5 hunters in the group, and we would go out to the edge of the island and wait for stellar sea lions to come by. And sometimes we wait for 7, 8 hours for one sea lion to come by. And the ocean that we're facing is 180 degrees of ocean. We're on an island. And, you know, by noontime, I mean, we'd get out there very early in the morning, just at sunrise, just like I did with the bird cliffs. And I noticed by noontime, I would get sleepy and daydreaming, but the hunters, they never did. And they weren't talking very much. They weren't moving very much. They were just sitting on the basalt boulder, looking out to the sea for a sea lion to come by. And that's all. And by noon, you know, I'd get daydreamy or sleepy or whatever, but the men never did. And I wondered, how could they do that? That's magical. And then I noticed that one hunter would say, "Kawakako, sea lion coming." And instantly, and I mean instantly, all the men would look at one spot in the ocean. Out of 180 degrees of ocean, the sea lion could be anywhere in that water, but they looked at one spot. And so I looked and I looked and I looked and didn't see a sea lion until about, you know, the men still were looking at that place very intently. So I knew that it must be there. And sure enough, the sea lion would pop up between 5 and 10 minutes after that person said, "Kawa kako." And the sea lion would appear right where they said. And I thought that was really magical, until I realized that what the birds taught me, the hunters already knew, and that I was never told any stories about this. I just found that out. And so what the birds were doing was what I decided to do when I went out hunting, was to stop thinking. And as soon as I did that, that's when the magic happened. I could feel the sea lion before it appears, where it's going to appear from. And then I applied that same understanding to fishing, where we use hook, line, and sinker to fish for halibut. And same magic happened, where I could feel the halibut before it hit the line. I can tell you when it bites the bait, whether or not I hook it by the lip or the jaw or the side of the body. I can tell you what size it is: 3 foot, 4 foot, 5 foot halibut. I can tell you generally whether or not it's male or female, and how it's going to fight on the way up. And all of this information is very necessary for a good hunter and fisherman. You have to have these abilities if you're going to be good at what you're doing. And all the men were good at it because they had to be, where they were getting food for the village, for their families, extended families, and for elders and for widows. And so being a good hunter and fisherman was very important. And ever since then, I would use that not thinking in whatever I do. And it has led me successfully through all of the trials and tribulations of life, where now I am 71 years old, and I still use it. That it guides me in what I do. This is probably what people call faith, but it's a faith to a degree that most people don't understand. It's a faith that is embodied at the cellular level. And that when you are that way and you are in the heart and present in the moment, the rest is taken care of. Ever since I've done that, everything that I needed was provided for every year. And I can't explain that except that that's how my people survived and thrived in the Bering Sea for over 10,000 years.
You speak with a lot of groups and college groups and these kinds of things. And do you feel with people that have not had this experience that they have difficulty understanding or imagining, or do they have a way to connect with what you're saying? Does the lesson get across to more urban people or others not from St. Paul?
It's kind of like trying to ask a two-dimensional being to look at the third dimension. You can't imagine it until you experience it. And so with the students, like I'm a visiting scholar at Columbia University, for example, I lead them through processes where they can experience it. Initially, they might experience it for 30 seconds or even less, 15 seconds. But once they do that, they have an idea of what this means to be not focused on the head. And traditionally, people in Alaska, we would say that the heart would tell the mind what to do. And the mind's job is to implement what your heart is telling you. And today we reverse that, where the mind is telling the heart what to do. And the Yupik elders call this the reverse society or the inside out society, because we reversed all the laws for living. And one of the most salient ones is that the mind is now in charge, when the heart used to be in charge. And the elders that I work with, one of the things that I helped start was the wisdom weavers of the world. We're still in existence, and we're going to go do a lot more this year with elders from all the tradition, or many of the traditions around the world. I brought together elders from every continent to answer two questions. One, what is the state of the world as they see it now? And two, what must we be doing now? And as a result of that, we created a team that is launching what the elders say on social media. We launched by Reuters last year on Earth Day, and we did a film, 14-minute film, that was seen by over 80,000 people worldwide. Was translated into 15 different languages. With this message, the reason that we're doing this is because they said, Mother Earth, she has survived for billions of years. She's going to survive for billions more. It's a question about whether or not we humans are going to survive. And it's going to be decided by people in this lifetime. And that what it requires is that we reach our gift within our hearts. The hearts, from our understanding, is the only place that is in connection with the divine. And it's never guides us wrong. It always guides us impeccably right. And that when we're present in the moment and in the heart, we will access the gift that we have individually for the world. Every single human being alive today is here for a purpose, because we're facing literally life or death decisions for our species. And that we need these gifts. And the only way to get them is to hear your heart. And now it's very hard to reach because the mind clutters up everything and makes us think that it's the heart speaking when it's in reality the mind. And so every solution, as viewed by the elders, every solution that's being brought forth by the state-of-the-art technology, state-of-the-art thinking, is nothing but the old regurgitated as the new. And so we're focused, you know, even Einstein said, you can't solve the problem with the same consciousness that created the problem in the first place. But that's exactly what we're doing. And so unless that changes and shifts dramatically, we're done for.
So, you know, the federal government made this move. They established this policy by executive order to offer some lip service to protecting the Bering Sea. And I asked you if the tribal villages were involved, if there was a process, and you said no, we don't have money, we're not funded to pull it together.
Yeah, it's not that we don't want to. We want to. Can you imagine the State of the Bering Sea report done by Native people around the entire Bering Sea that's published, let's say, every 2 years? That would change the way, number one, that people hear or not hear Native ways of knowing. And number two, change the way that we manage things, because the management that is being done now is, I mean, for example, we view the science as taking apart pieces of creation and studying it in hopes that we can understand the whole. When the Native people look at the whole and realize that it's greater than the sum of its parts, and therefore studying one piece of it is not going to get you there. And scientists are now just beginning to understand this. Therefore, there's developing ecosystem approaches. But even that is the tip of the iceberg in terms of what needs to be done from the eyes of Native people.
Let me begin again. I'm sorry, I was muted. You explained that you had been raised in an environment that required you to expand your consciousness, your visual field, to come to grips with your role in this place. So how do these teachings, how could these teachings contribute to better management?
Well, for example, just one example, which is a stretch for most scientists and researchers, is that language is more special than most linguists give it. It contains a vibration. These are languages of people who've been in an area for thousands of years, that it contains a vibration that comes from Mother Earth herself. And through that interchange, Native peoples around the world are able to commune with Mother Earth. And so they hear Mother Earth and what she's saying and what we need to do. And this is something that cannot be documented in scientific terms, empirically, but is so true. So this is one of the things that when you go to your heart, then you will know what you need to do personally with your life and or with the world. And that what you need to do, one of the things that we know as Native people is that we have to be in alignment and in harmony with Mother Earth. And what that harmony means is way different than what Western society sees it. Most of the powers that be look at us as threats that we don't want any development, for example. But nothing can be further from the truth that we do evolve and have very sophisticated ecosystem approaches from different parts of the world. It's different, but it's something that is that reflects the what people get from being in an area. And so what we know in the Bering Sea, the scientists, bless their hearts, they're struggling with trying to understand what's happening in the Bering Sea, but they don't know the kinds of things that we know. For example, our elders tell us that the fur seals and the seabirds are like honeybees. They send out scouts looking for food, and they come back and they signal it to their rookery. And that's something that scientists poo-pooed until we got together with Russian scientists. We went to the Shirshov Institute of Oceanology, and the second in command was Michael Flint, who headed up a team of transdisciplinary scientists, not interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary. And so we thought, well, this is a group that we might be able to work with as Native people. And so we asked them, and they said, yes, they were chomping at the bit. And so we brought them out to the Pribilof Islands. And they worked with us where the Native people used Native science, and they used their science, transdisciplinary science, and we combined the two, and we put together a report that must have been at least 1.5 feet thick over a 4-year period. And this report, if it is published in every country except the US. The US, at that time, the peer group review group said this is primitive science. That is, joint venturing with Native people is primitive science. And so it is still not published in the US today. But one of the things that the elders, when the elders said the birds and seals are like honeybees, I went to the scientists there and I said, what would it take to prove this? And they said, well, we can't do that because it costs too much money. And so I went to the Russian scientists and asked them, is there a way we can prove this? And they said, well, there's a way to show that this is probably true by comparing least auklet colonies that are 1/4 mile apart from each other, because we know what the food sources are out to the continental shelf from the Pribilof Island. And so we said, 1/4 mile apart, let's see if they eat something each different, because the only food source for least auklets was 1/4 mile from the island or 200 miles away. And what we found out was that one colony foraged 200 miles away at the continental shelf. The other colony foraged 1/4 mile away. And that was evidence enough for us. So we took that to the National Marine Fisheries Service, who manages fur seals, and we said, well, here's what we got. They said, what would it take to do this with fur seal? And they said, well, maybe about $400,000 and radio tag. We can get radio tagging and satellite telemetry data. And so I went to Washington, D.C. and got the national director for the National Marine Fisheries Service to go to St. Paul for a weekend. And at the end of it, he said, okay, what do you need? And so we got the $400,000, and the scientists found out that the fur seals, which are located in different parts of the island in rookeries, go to different places to find food. And the birds did the same thing. This is just one example of what we know, that the agencies don't tap because they are on a mission budget. Their mission for their department, they're going to find out about the number of fur seals, let's say, or in the case of Fish and Wildlife Service, let's find out the number of birds that forage, that lay eggs, and that kind of thing. That's all they did, with just numbers. And when we took students from the high school there, 3 students, and we asked them to duplicate Fish and Wildlife Service methodologies to study seabirds, and we added the Unangan way of knowing. It says use your Unangan way of knowing at the same time. And when they came up with their report at the end of the season, we showed that to the Fish and Wildlife Service regional director, and he came back to us 2 weeks later and said, this is the best graduate level report I've ever seen. Who did this? And when we told him it was high school students, his jaw dropped. And so the reason that this is noteworthy is because it changed the way Fish and Wildlife Service studies seabird colonies all along coastal America. Just these 3 kids.
Well, that's hopeful.
Yeah.
That they listened. What do you hope for, if that's the correct term? Maybe hope is not so relevant as experience. What happens tomorrow or with the next breath?
That's right.
So where are we with the Bering Sea?
Well, you know, they've been studying it for 30 years. Unangan people, Pribilof, we flagged that there was an ecosystem-wide issue that was occurring in the Bering Sea starting in 1977. We testified in numerous forums, governmental forums, for 10 years, saying this is what's happening, this is what's happening. But they considered our information anecdotal. It may be useful, maybe not. We don't know, you know. And
right, it's unproven. It's a story.
And so our information never hit the surface of government publications. But what we saw was that the nearshore foragers, the distance foragers, the depth foragers, the surface foragers, birds and seals and sea lion were all having food problems, because we noticed that birds, the adult birds, they had their breastbones sticking out, their chest muscles caved in, chicks were falling off of cliff ledges in larger numbers than ever in living memory. When we fleshed the pelt of the seal, we could see light through it. We never saw that before. All these kinds of things that told us that it was an ecosystem-wide phenomena. And the National Marine Fisheries Service and the Fish and Wildlife Service didn't conclude that until 10 years later, and that we were right, and that they would have shaved off hundreds of thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours of scientific time in forming their hypothesis, which was at that time high seas net entanglement was the reason that fur seals were declining. But we knew differently. And had they listened to us in the very beginning, they would have shaved off 10 years from their studies. Now, after 30 years of this kind of research, they still can't say what's happening to the animals and birds that are declining, and they're declining massively. I mean, the Bering Sea is restructuring in a way that is very hard to recognize now. We have, you know, stellar sea lions are down by 80%. Fur seals are down from a population of 1.2 million when I was there to about 475,000 today, and still declining. We have seabirds that are, that are massively they're down by 60 to 80% from 30 years ago. And still nothing's happening in the Bering Sea to change the way that we manage. And we maintain that we need to change in a way that gives Native people an equal seat at the decision-making tables about what's being studied, or they fund us so that we can develop our own capacity to develop whatever information that we develop from our observation and interpret them, and then put that out as a report. And in the meantime, we can interact with the scientists every 6 months or a year or so and say what worked, what didn't work, and why, and figure out what to do to solve the problems.
So how are the elders feeling about this now? I mean, about the interactions with the federal government and the things that need to take place. Are we making progress?
The interactions, I mean, it's still, we're making a little progress, but not anywhere near what's required right now. And so one of the things that St. George, for example, has decided to do is that they are going to be a voice for the animals and birds that are declining. And they want to establish a national marine sanctuary on St. George that goes out to the continental shelf. And because they feel like no one's speaking on behalf of the whole Bering Sea. They're speaking, yes, for their regions. And they all are concerned about what's happening in the other areas, but we don't have the capacity to interact with each other.
Mm-hmm. Have you had any communications with the new administration or the Fish and Wildlife Service recently, or these organizations? Have you been given any indication of changes in policy or approach?
Yeah. NOAA takes care of the National Marine Sanctuary programs. And we have a total of 5 years to get our program together for St. George. And we're in year 4. We're now going into year 5. And the Biden administration officials are very enthusiastic about what we're proposing. But we have to deal with the negative aspects that are being brought out by the industrialized fishing industry that says this plan will destroy fisheries. But nothing can be further from the truth. It just calls for research that will be, that's the way that the North Pacific Fishery Management Council operates anyway, but that we would have special research in the Bering Sea that is focused on these areas of why the declines of these species are happening, and do something about it.
What is the time frame that you see?
Well, like I said, we have 5 years, and we're on year 4, going on year 5. And next year, hopefully, we will be successful in getting this through, but it requires the approval of all the stakeholders in the Bering Sea. And that first will mean, of course, the native people of the Bering Sea. There are about 65,000 people. And the state of Alaska, the congressional delegation, the fishing industry. These are people that we have to reach to help them understand what this kind of designation doesn't threaten fisheries. But right now, they are spreading rumors, some of them are spreading rumors that this is an anti-fishing measure.
That's a very simple way of looking at it.
Yep.
Is complexity part of the problem, that's hard to communicate, or if the experience isn't there, the mind goes to a simple idea or a more simple idea, or is that part of the Western education system that the colonizers brought?
It's the way the Western system works, which is unfortunate. But hopefully we can get through that so that what we develop in the Bering Sea will revolutionize management of the oceans worldwide.
Have you had contacts with other Arctic nations?
Yes.
Well, Russia, you mentioned Russia, but I'm thinking of, Finland and Sweden and Greenland and Denmark. And
we plan to bring up people that are already members or already have a designation of a marine sanctuary in their area, and to come to Alaska to tell what they experience in terms of all of the things about managing marine sanctuaries and its impact on fisheries. In all cases, the fishery improved.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that there's any case where the fishery did not improve.
Do you notice changes in temperature? Is temperature part of the changing equation?
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the word climate change as we use it or the policy implications. I'm just talking about, is the ocean warmer?
Yep. There's no question that the Bering Sea is 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius warmer than it was 30 years ago. And that's affecting everything, including everything inland of Alaska, where, for example, we have salmon that are showing up with parasites that are breeding in the Bering Sea, and it's warmer, so they're breeding faster and they're feeding on salmon. And we have so much just one example of the salmon themselves, the elders feel like it's going to disappear. And this is a big thing because Alaska is known for its wild salmon. And not only are they showing up with parasites, the people are saying they're showing up with lesions on them. And the reason for that is because the water levels in all the rivers, including the Yukon and Kuskokwim rivers, are so low in some areas that the fish are rubbing against the rocks, getting lesions as a result. And so one year there was 40% of the salmon up the Yukon River were showing up with lesions. Then you've got beaver dams showing up. Beaver dams are showing up in every river body in Alaska now, even above the Arctic Circle. We're seeing beaver above the Arctic Circle. We've never seen that before. And so when they create beaver dams, that further exacerbates the problem of lower water levels. And it just goes on and on.
Is the range of the beaver expanding because of the temperature change, or?
Yes, it's because of the temperature change and the change of forage, where they're going further north for the food that they normally have in their area, but now has gone further north. The trees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard there's trees on the tundra now.
Yep, there is.
That they're rooting.
And we're having tundra fires. There's so many things. And what people need to realize is that they interact with each other. When we have tundra fires and we have the salmon having problems and the beaver going north, and all of these things interact with each other, most of it in a negative way. Mm-hmm. Right now, in the climate crisis that we have.
Can you talk to me a little bit specifically about the Yukon River salmon and what your thoughts are, your experience?
Well, when I was up in one of the Yukon River villages, for example, um, a woman called over and said, "Here, I want you to take a look at this." And she has salmon hanging on her wooden frames, and she pulls on the meat or the flesh of the salmon, and it falls off. This is something that has never happened before. And we know that that is due to all these factors that I'm talking about that are affecting salmon. That's just one example. Another example, I was in Chalkitsik, and the state of Alaska was going to cut down the take of moose from the local people. And so they called together 7 chiefs of the area. And the guy explained he was doing aerial transects to do a ratio check on bull moose to female moose. And he took 45 minutes to discuss it. And then the chiefs listened very, very patiently. And then the head chief said, "Did you notice that the water levels in the rivers are going down?" He says, "No, hydrology is not my department." And he said, "Do you know that when water levels go down, the fours that moose eat disappear?" And he says, "No, that is somebody else's bailiwick. It's not my department." And he says, then the chief continued on, "Well, do you know that there are more beaver dams in the area?" And he says, "No, beavers are another department, another agency that takes care of beaver." And so that's the way the conversation went. And then finally, this guy from the state says he genuinely wanted to do something positive. So he said, "Maybe you should talk to the Board of Game." And you could hear the silent moans of the chiefs, because they know that the Board of Game uses best available science to make decisions on these things, and best available science de facto means not native ways of knowing. And so they knew that this would be a useless thing. So it's really quite challenging.
There's an official term for native ways of knowing, I think, right? Like an abbreviation like TKE, traditional knowledge and...
Well, that's the Western way.
Okay.
We say traditional knowledge and wisdom. The elders are saying this knowledge without wisdom is not only useless, but could be dangerous. And that wisdom is not factored in Western science. And so we developed warehouses full of information. We're the most knowledge-based society in the world, in history. And look at what the results are. Without that wisdom, I'm afraid, we're not going to do it on knowledge alone. It's not logical. It's not rational. It comes from the heart. And that's where you get the wisdom. So anyway, TKW.
KKW, good, thank you. Well, there's a lot of complexity and overlapping subject matter, as you mentioned, in the eyes of the Western science. And where for you on the island, you live there. It's about life. It's about everything around you.
Yep, that's for sure.
And it's funny how that's simpler, but it's more complex. The ability to see and understand and fit in is a much more complex situation.
That's right. And it is a kind of a science, this native ways of knowing. That scientists think it's not that can be categorized as science. It can't be categorized in the way that Western education and training systems work. But do we validate information? The assumption is we don't validate, but we have a validation system that is informal. we tell each other about what we're seeing and all that. And then pretty soon everybody says, yeah, we're seeing that too. And that's when they say, okay, this is happening. It's an informal process that is accurate. I mean, when you think about it, Native peoples have been in Alaska for 10,000 years. And when you go out hunting and fishing, you need to be 100% accurate in knowing what's happening. Otherwise, people die, or you put your crews in unsafe conditions, or you don't get food. We had to do this, and that's what we have inherited today.
Is there anything you'd like to say to my colleagues in New York City who will be watching this? You speak to Columbia. We have a different group at City University of New York. They're very diverse. They're from all over the world. They have a lot of different perspectives.
Yep, I know, but it's still following an epistemology that is problematic by itself. Yeah, I would just ask your colleagues to really listen to what I've said with an open mind and hopefully open heart, that when you really delve into Native ways of knowing, right now the science is only touching the tip of the iceberg of what we know. And if you can become an ally to us in trying to set up systems that can respond to Western science, then you're going to really get into what's really happening and what we need to do about it. Lacking that, we're lost.
Mm-hmm. Well, I thank you, and God bless you.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Maybe the Russian Orthodox side of you might say it that way.
Yeah.
But I thought, okay, we'll try that.
Thank you.
That's the way I feel. I don't use the word God too much. I use creator every now and then. And I think, I'm very grateful to be in this wonderful world where I have so much to learn. So I really appreciate your teaching and sharing so much with me and our group in New York.
Yeah, well, it's we have been given by the creator everything that we need. And scarcity is only is like I say, we created body odor just to sell deodorants. That's what scarcity is like. And so just remember, we have been given everything that we need.
Thank you.
Okay.
I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. We'll talk again soon. Okay. I want to come up to Alaska in the summer and sit on a log and watch the salmon and just talk some more.
There you go. Come to Homer.
Okay, that's where you're going to be this summer?
That's where we live.
Okay, not going anywhere.
Yeah, okay.
I can ring the doorbell.
Okay.
See you later, Larry. Thank you again.
Yeah.
Take care.
Take care.